Hello everybody, welcome to the video on paper P7, Advanced Audit and Assurance. My name is Preeti Joseph. I am the tutor for paper P7. This is a video on the exam tips of paper P7. Giving you the structure of the paper. The paper is actually broken down into two sections. You have section A as well as you have section B. Section A of the paper is broken down into two questions. You have question 1, which is worth 35 marks, and you have question 2, which is worth 25 marks. So the total of that is worth 60 marks of your paper. Whereas section B of your paper is where you have an option. You have 3 questions. Out of the 3, you need to choose any 2 questions. Each of the question is going to be worth 20 marks. So that is technically comprising of 40% of your paper. So that is the structure when you're talking about paper P7. Now going into details of each and every question. Question 1 will be predominantly around the planning stage of your audit, where they will ask you in terms of what can be or evaluate what are the different business risks that is faced in this company. Along with the business risk, they can even ask you to evaluate what are the audit risks. Please be extremely careful. There is a difference between this term called as audit risk and the risk of material misstatement. If the question asks you for audit risk, you need to focus on inherent risk, control risk, as well as detection risk. But if the question asks you to evaluate only the risk of material misstatements, then you're only focusing on just the control risk and the inherent risk. You do not need to look for detection risk, irrespective if it is there in the scenario or not. Okay. The second kind of question, or the third kind of question that can come for you as part of question number 1 is where they will ask you to design audit procedures worth around maybe say 6 to 8 marks of the paper. They will be specific to the audit risk that you have identified. So from the audit risk in the scenario, 1 or 2 of the audit risk they will pick up, and on that particular account balance they will ask you to design audit procedures. The fourth kind of question that can come you is where they will ask you to evaluate what are the ethical issues that you may come across in this particular scenario. So these are the 4 questions that normally tends to be tested as part of question number 1. So you have business risk, then you will have audit risk, or they can ask you for the risk of material misstatement, and then they can ask you on audit procedures, or they can even call it as substantive procedures, and then they can ask you for ethical issues and give the required actions for that. Of these 4 parts of the question, definitely what's going to come in question number 1 is going to be on audit risk as well as audit procedures. Business risk may be there, may not be there, but the last sitting or it's not being tested, therefore there is a high possibility that business risk may come for you as question number 1 for you. When you're looking at the structure, in terms of question number 1, they can either ask you a single entity company to evaluate what are the different audit risks, or else they can look at from a group point of view. So they'll give you a group structure and where they'll ask you to evaluate what are the different, let's say, business risk and the audit risk. You need to be comfortable with both the areas of the syllabus. Like in terms of how do you look at things from a single entity point of view, and how do we look at from a group point of view, as the audit risk are slightly different from these 2 points. Whereas question number 2 is predominantly on 2 areas of the syllabus. Either they can ask you for an other assurance assignment, where they can ask you a question on PFI, that's prospective financial information, or else they can ask you on due diligence, or else they can ask you on forensic investigation, or else it can be on social environmental information review. So it can either be on other assurance assignment question, or else it can be matters to be considered at a completion stage of audit question. So it depends on what gets tested. If either one of them gets tested, then the other question would be as an option question in section B of your paper. So you just need to look for it in terms of, as I said, with the trend in the questions that has been for the past papers, we have seen that matters to be considered tends to be tested as a question 2, and they're putting now other assurance assignment as section B as an option question. But as I said, the examiner can change his style of writing the questions, where he can do it the other way around as well. So you just need to be comfortable with it. If other assurance assignment comes in, there's very high probability that either it can be a review on a PFI, like a prospective financial information, where they can ask you to do a review of an interim financial statement of the current year. They can either ask you to do a review of a cash flow forecast or a forecast on an FS of a financial statement. Yeah, that's one probability of a question that can come under other assurance assignment, or else it can be something on due diligence also. So if you're talking about due diligence, they can ask you about a possible acquisition of another competitor, where they will ask you for some advice or they'll ask you for evaluation on that particular acquisition. It can be from any of these two topics when you're talking about due diligence. So these are the two probable areas that we're talking about from an other assurance assignment point of view. Forensic investigation or fraud investigation is a favorite area of the examiner, so you need to be comfortable with it. So do not ignore it completely, because they can put a small part of it anywhere, as you know, even in part of question number 1 as well. So you need to just be comfortable with forensic and fraud investigations. Whereas if the question comes around matters to be considered at the completion stage of audit, the question will be linked with either asking you to do audit procedures, or else they're asking you to do audit evidences. So you have to be comfortable with the structure of the question. So if you're talking about matters to be considered, the structure in the layout of your answer is you need to first talk about the materiality, whether that particular issue is material or not on the FS. Then you need to talk about the issue that is being faced in that scenario. Link that issue to the standard, explaining the standard, the relevant standard. Then talk about the potential risk, whether it's being an overstatement or an understatement. And then finally, you need to talk about either the audit procedures or the audit evidence, depending on what the question is asked you in the requirements. Okay. Depending on what gets tested as question 2, then the other question would be as either question 3 or question 4 of your paper as a section B question. So moving on to section B of the paper. So as I said, one of the potential questions between question 3 and question 4 will be the matters to be considered at the completion stage of the audit. The second probability of a question that can come for you is where they will ask you to evaluate on the ethical, the professional, and the quality issues faced in the scenario. Quality control is a highly examinable topic, and it's a favorite area of the examiner, where they will try to put in something about quality control and the procedures revolving around that. So you should be comfortable with what was the international standards of quality control. Number 1 talks about what are the 6 elements that go into that, and how can you develop procedures for each one of them. Okay, ethical and professional issues, again, is the same thing that we're talking about, where ethical is, we need to link it from your fundamental principles to your ethical threats, and you need to explain the ethical issue and give me safeguards. Okay, when we are moving on from that kind of a question, so these are the two possibilities of question that can come for you as question 3 and question 4. It can either be a matters to be considered question at a completion stage of the audit. Second, it can be ethical and professional and quality issues, and give me the actions for that. Whereas question number 5 will then be on audit reports, where there are only 2 types of questions that can come for you. One, they can ask you to appraise the audit report. So they'll give you an extract of an audit report, and you need to identify what are the issues that are there, explaining me what are the issues, and you need to give me the recommendation as to what are the modifications that needs to be done on that particular extract. Keep in mind, you're never going to be expected to reproduce an audit report. It'll only be extracts. So just one day before the exam, just go through an extract of an unmodified report so that you're comfortable with what needs to go into that particular extract. A second kind of question for part of question number 5 is where they'll give you small scenarios, and you'll need to critically appraise the scenario and talk about the impact on the audit report. So they'll give you 3-4 scenarios, and then that will come up to your 20 marks in the paper. Question 5 is guaranteed. It's always going to be on audit report. So you know one question which is confirmed. But question 3 and question 4 is what keeps changing in terms of what can be tested in those areas. Giving you a structure in terms of how much marks or how much time do you need to allocate for each and every question. So when you're doing question number 1, you need to spend at least 15 minutes for planning the question. So when you read through the question, you underline the requirements, you underline the main points, link it to some accounting standards. So that is what you need to do for 15 minutes. But keep up to the time, because it's very, very important for paper P7, because time management is crucial. Most of the students who have written this paper previously would tell you also with experience that P7 is definitely a time consuming paper. It is time pressured. So you don't have time at all to, sit and think and wonder about certain matters. You just have time to just write. So you have totally 3 hours and 15 minutes. There is no reading time separately. So the total 3 hours and 15 minutes is your writing time. But I still need you to utilize some amount of time for planning before you can start writing the actual answer. So I'll give you a breakdown as to what you need to do for question 1, question 2 and 3 to 5. So starting with question 1, as I told you, question 1 you need to spend 15 minutes for planning. That's 15 minutes for planning. Yeah, after 15 minutes gets over, then the remaining time will be your writing time. So you need to spend around between 50 to 55 minutes for writing. Yeah, I do not want you to take anything more than that, because then you're eating up or reducing the time to write up the answers for the remaining parts of the questions or for question 2 moving forward. So please make sure you stop when you're doing question number 1. You look at the clock, say 15 minutes, you stop 15 minutes for planning and then start writing, and exactly in 50-55 minutes you stop writing that answer, and then you move on to the next part of the questions. Question 2, you need to spend 10 minutes for planning. Yeah, only 10 minutes, do not take anything more than that, and then take around between 30 to 35 minutes for writing up the answer. That is for question 2 of your paper. Then between question 3 to question 5, as I told you, you have 3 questions. You need to choose any 2 of the questions. In section B of your paper, you need to take around 10 minutes for planning, and you need to take only 25 minutes to 30 minutes to write up your answer. Do not take anything more than that. Kind request, keep up to the time. So what you need to do, the first thing is when the examiner or the invigilator says your time starts now, open up the paper, look at all the requirements of the paper, and then see which is the area of the syllabus that you're comfortable with and rank them. So you have an option. You can start with question 5, then if you want you can come to question 1, then if you want you can come back to question 3, then you can come to question 2. You can change the order in whichever way you want. You always start with the question that you're comfortable with or you know the best. Yeah, and then do the question that you're not comfortable with at all at the very, very end. Always make the marker or the examiner happy when they should enjoy marking your papers. Yeah, so keep up to the time limit. Do not start doing question 1 first, because it's going to eat up a lot of your time. So kind request, please start with section B of the paper, finish off the questions in section B, and then move on to section A of the paper. Yeah. The reason why we say to move on to first do section B and then section A, because as I told you, section A takes up a lot of your time, especially question 1 of the paper. So if you start off with question 1, it is the wrong structure for paper P7. So I'm specifically emphasizing here, this structure which I'm mentioning is only for paper P7. Please go look through the other videos for the other structures or the other approaches for the paper. Yeah, I hope this video has been useful for you. Yeah, all the very best for your exam, and do let me know how it goes. Thank you very, very much for watching this video. God bless.